So, good evening, friends. On behalf of Higher Education Forum and SIBM Hyderabad, we have a great pleasure of welcoming you to this very interesting and important talk on generative leadership. And to talk on this particular topic, we have a very distinguished personality, Dr. Miriam Subirana, who is with us all the way from the Spain. Now, before we get on to the distinguished personality of the day, for the people who are not the members of the higher education in the true sense, let me just introduce in a minute that Higher Education Forum is an what you call individual-centric organization of the higher education teachers. We believe in that the rather than focusing on a particular stream of higher education, because there are stream-wise educational institution associations in India. So we thought to launch this particular forum, which is more of a individual-centric institution. And we started our journey in 2009. So we are more than approximately about 12, 13 years old. And we have been engaged in two ways. The one is, of course, the think tank of the higher education in India. And the second is the capacity building of the higher education teachers and the students in India. So those are the twofold objective we are engaged in. We also have a biannual journal, which is called the HEF Journal of Higher Education. And that's the only journal in the space of the higher education in India. So we welcome you once again to this particular interesting faculty development program. And as you know, that the leadership is one of the most research, let me put in that way, one of the most research topics, one of the most talked about topics, not only the area of the management, but in any sphere. So whether we are working into the manufacturing unit, whether working into the service unit, whether we are into banking unit, we always see the discussion among the leaders and the non-leaders and so on and so forth. And there are various theories have emerged in the areas of the leadership, various prominent personalities all over the world. They have written various articles, various thought-provoking articles in the areas of the leadership, and therefore have emerged the various theories of leadership. So one is talking about transaction leadership, one is talking about transformational leadership, one is talking about autocratic leadership, one is talking about benevolent leadership, and so on and so forth. There are many theories of the leadership emerged. And one of the interesting theories of the leadership is the generative leadership. And how it is different from the others, we will learn it very shortly. So I am really grateful to Madam Subirana, Madam Miriam Subirana, to be with us today. And I must say that she is here through the initiative of one of my close friends, Professor R.K. Jain, who is the director of SIBM Hyderabad. So I hand over the floor to Professor Ravi Jain and request him to kindly introduce Madam and take the proceedings forward. Professor Ravi Jain, the floor is open to you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sen Gupta. And every time I part of this HEF forum events, I can't but prevent myself from appreciating the kind of energy and enthusiasm that you display, demonstrate even at this age in bringing together the academic fraternity and working for the best interest of the academic fraternity, getting the best from across the world in terms of thoughts and experiences. And today's session is one such initiative. Thanks to you for all the facilitation. And my special thanks to Dr. Subirana Miriam for accepting my invite without any questions. And we are here today. SIBM Hyderabad, you all know, we are part of a big university system called Symbiosis International University, headquartered in Pune. My campus is located in Hyderabad. We are 7 years old, and when perhaps the fastest growing, youngest B schools in the country. We are already ranked among the top 50 institutions, 50 B schools. Last year's ranking was, we are placed at 36, all India in private education, private B school space. And in terms of students and faculty distribution, we get students from all across the country. And I mean, in fact, my typical classroom composition would be from 23 states. As a part of Symbiosis family, we carry the legacy of academic excellence and industry connect as our differentiators. Coming to today's topic, as Professor Sen Gupta suggested, leadership has been the most researched, most controversial, most debated, and most disagreed upon, I would say, concepts in the management arena. And today we are going to have one more thought leader, researcher, crusader in generative leadership and appreciative inquiry. May I request Professor Tanmay Day, my colleague, who has been championing these events from our end, to do the honors of introducing Dr. Subirana. Dr. Tanmay.
Thank you, Jain sir. Thank you, Professor Sengupta, for giving me an opportunity. It's a great pleasure to welcome Madam Miriam Subirana, who is the resource person of the FDP on generative leadership, organized by Higher Education Forum and SIBM Hyderabad. Miriam Subirana has done her PhD from the University of Barcelona, Spain. She is at present the director of Institute IDEI for Dialogue and Appreciative Inquiry, a coach, PPC certified by International Coach Federation. Professor Miriam Subirana is an international speaker, coach, and thinking partner of leaders in international organizations, education institutes, and NGOs. Professor Miriam offers open programs on strength-based methodologies like appreciative inquiry, creativity, mindfulness, meditation, and other approaches which attract senior leaders from global companies, public agencies, consultants, and researchers. She offers training on appreciative inquiry, including appreciative and generative leadership, appreciative inquiry coaching, to name a few. She is a visiting professor at different management schools in Europe and Latin America, like ESET, EAE Business School, Euromed Management School, Cage Business School at Marshall, France, to name a few. She is the author of 14 books published in 7 languages. 3 books has been published in India by Indra Publication. Professor Miriam is trained in self-management leadership by Oxford Leadership Academy. Also trained as a coach by Coaching Training Institute, US, by Robert Dilts on generative coaching, David Copperrider on appreciative inquiry at KISS Western Reserve University of USA. Also trained as a mediator in facilitating dialogue processes and efforts on mediation, program to promote women peacemakers at Folklore Bernard Academy, Sando, Sweden. We welcome you, Professor Miriam, to this FDP. The session is all yours. We have 60 minutes where you can present thought and enlighten us with generative leadership. Post that, we'll put up the Q&A part for the participants to ask questions to you. Ma'am, all yours. Welcome once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am really honored to be here with you. There is a lot of research to share about appreciative leadership and generative leadership. And of course, the challenge is time, how to do it in a short time. And so what I'm going to do is to share a few ideas. And I've prepared sort of an agenda for today. I'm going to show it to you. So, well, first of all, say that I'm also a painter, and many of the paintings I've done have been inspired in my trips in India. I chose this painting because it's like a fire that generates other fires. And the idea of generative leadership, the word generative, it's that it generates life, it co-creates something that moves us forward. And the idea is I'm going to focus on understanding leadership as a relational act, exploring generative listening as part of leadership, learning and focusing on SOAR as a model for strategic thinking and generative collaboration. And then practice. What kind of conversations are you having? Because I am sure that all of us that are here today are engaged always in many conversations. So let us start. And I want to start about living as a relational act. Living is a set of relational acts. It means that we are, the relational acts mean how do we ask things? How do we propose things? How do we accept a no from someone that collaborates with us? How do we impose or not impose on others? How do we come into agreement? So relational acts is the capacity of relating with the other to come into agreement so that we move forward, so that we don't get stuck in the relationship. And this is one of the first challenges that we have in relationships. How do we move forward instead of moving backwards? How, as a leading is relational, because if you don't have any relationship with anyone, then you are not leading. You are a leader when there are other followers. And one part of the generative leadership is not only inquiring about leadership, but about the followers. That is about those that are with the leader. What kind of relationship is established? So leading is a relational act. Leading is relational, and we are going to explore in these few minutes that I'm going to share with you about different aspects of what is relational. Leading is also leading processes. Leading an organization is co-creating and moving through a set of processes. Many times, maybe leaders are too focused in the organizational chart and not so much in the process, how something enters the organization and what is the output, what is the input and what is the output, and what happens in between. And what happens in between is that through relationships and through a series of processes, what comes in comes out different. For example, education is a relational process. A student comes into the university and comes out, hopefully, having learned, having developed, having grown as a person. What is the process that happens during those years that the student is going through the university? It's a series of relational acts. And so leading as a generative leadership is living, being conscious of the different processes that go through in our relationship. Then another aspect in this relationing is appreciative generative intelligence. And as Professor Tachan-Carey says, appreciative intelligence is seeing the oak in the acorn. This means seeing the tree in the seed. The oak is a big tree, the acorn is small. So you may have someone in front of you and you see him or her as an acorn, that is, as a seed. And depending on how you see that seed, you will help it grow or not. If you think this is useless, this person is useless, then your projection of what you are seeing doesn't help that person to grow. So one of the main aspects of generative leadership is to apply to develop this appreciative generative intelligence, in which when I have a student in front of me, in the case of professors that we are leading classes, or when I have a collaborator in front of me, can I see all the potential of that person? Or I only see through my square vision and through my limited beliefs? So generative leadership is the one that is able to see the potential of that person that collaborates, that helps, that is part of the team. And in this sense, for example, coming back to the metaphor of the seed and the tree, the seed becomes a tree when many ingredients facilitate the generative process. For example, the water, the light, the soil, the time. So in a relational process of generative leadership, we also need to see which are those ingredients that help your team to flourish, that help your team to take risks, to move forward, to think out of the box. How do you create that atmosphere, which is generative, so that the seed becomes a tree? So one of the aspects is caring for the relational practice, that is co-create meaning. It's not the leader that decides what is the meaning of whatever we are doing, but what is the meaning for you? What is the meaning for the other person? Who are we to one another? How much we care about each other? This is also a real powerful asset of a generative leader, caring for the relational practice. And as you know, some relational practices are destructive. They destroy, they create lack of hope. They do not empower the person, but they weaken the person. They create like a shadow on that person. And so a real generative leader actually does the opposite, removes the other from the shadow so that he or she can shine. And is aware that our well-being depends to a great extent on our ways of relating. So co-creation is a generative process. We co-create together. So this is one of the fundamental aspects of generative leadership. The other is, how do we create generative environments? And I use this painting in which the light goes upwards and it's like it generates life. And I call this painting heliotropic in honor of the heliotropic principle, which is the principle by which plants and living systems go towards the light. Helios is light in Greek. So how the plants go towards the light, it means that each one of us, when we go towards what gives us light, towards what makes us flourish, towards what gives meaning to what we do and who we are, that is applying the heliotropic principle, creating an environment in which people flourish. So this is the essence of a generative leader that creates environments that go from well and good to great and exceptional. And in adverse conditions in which there are conflicts of opinion or of values, when problems have to be solved, when there are disappointments, when the other fails you, you can transform the degenerative situation into a generative one, like a spiral upwards. And this requires those relational practices in which instead of going downwards, we go upwards. And we will explore some of these abilities to change a situation in which the team or the group is going downwards. It means going into complaint, into criticism, negative criticism, into talking ill, into weakening each other, into attacking, into using language which is not generative of life, but actually it creates a bad atmosphere. So a generative leader takes care of the relational practices in which, as we will explore now in a few minutes, conversations, the questions we ask, and how we listen are essential. So let's continue with the presentation. And part of these relational practices are generative leadership. This is from Professor Otto Scharmer, the theory U, in which he shares how normally we listen to each other from our own judgment. That is to reconfirm our old opinions. So it means our mind is closed. We are not really listening. We are just filtering and listening to what confirms what we already believe. The level of listening to, it's not from habits like listening one, but it's listening with an open mind, listening to new data, to new information, to be open mentally to what the other is sharing, noticing the differences and gathering new information. So this is listening from an open mind. This is very necessary in the universities to listen through an open mind, so that the students can really get new information, but we as professors also. And then listening from within. It's what is called empathic listening, with an open heart, seeing through another person's eyes, creating an emotional connection. And then we go into the generative listening, which is level 4, which is listening from the source, from the future that wants to emerge. This requires open will. If I am fixed in what I want to do and how I want to do it, I will not be able to reach this level of listening, because it requires the open will to change and to connect to an emerging future that shifts in identity and self. For the believers would be to listen from the perspective of God's will, if we can say it in this way, from the perspective of the tree that wants to emerge. So I can see the seed, but if I listen from a generative aspect in which my will is open, I'm able to see the emerging future, the tree that wants to emerge from that seed. This is really very powerful. And I am sure that all of us have had conversations in which the other was listening to me in such a way that I realized something that wanted to emerge from me. This tree, I thought I was a plant, and now all of a sudden I see, wow, I have another potential. I can explore these other aspects. So this is generative listening, and a generative leader practices that. And I think this is really a shift, because many leaders are used to speak more and listen less. Now I can ask, how many ears do you have? And how many mouths do you have? We have one mouth and 2 ears. That is, we should listen double than what we speak. But normally leaders speak double than what they listen, or even more. So this is a key aspect of generative leader, the capacity to listen. What is it that wants to emerge? Now let's continue with the presentation. The second aspect is about a generative way to soar. And I put soar in italics here, soar in italics, because in English, soaring is a verb which means to uplift the self, like the bird that opens the wings and doesn't do anything but allow himself to be carried by the current of the air to go up. Soaring also is like the river that flows through fire. And it doesn't get dry, but it flows through. But soar also is a method, which is different than SWOT. I'm sure you have heard about SWOT, a way of analysis of generating a diagnostic in organizations. And many times in universities and in management schools, the students are taught this method, SWOT. SWOT comes from the military strategy. What are the strengths, but what are the threats? What are the weaknesses? We need to understand the weaknesses of the enemy so that we can overcome him or her. This comes from the military origin of a lot of what our management schools are teaching. Of course, I don't know exactly what is being taught in India. I talk about my experience in the management schools where I teach. So here I'm going to offer you a different view. And how would it be if instead of SWOT, we do SOAR, in which we choose to have a generative view, generative listening, and inquire into strengths, which is the first S. To imagine the opportunities, which is the O of the SOAR. To innovate, which is to reach the aspirations of everyone involved, which is the A of the SOAR. And to inspire to implement, that is to achieve the results. This is the R of the SOAR. Of course, to do a training on how to SOAR, that would take a lot more hours. So now I'm just, in a few minutes, I'm going to share about SOAR, but this is a whole methodology that is applied in appreciative inquiry and by generative leaders. So one of the books that you can find on this website, SOAR Strategy, by its founder, Jacqueline Stavros. She's also part of the team of IDEA, where I am the founder of IDEA Academy. So SOAR is a profoundly positive approach to strategic thinking and planning that allows an organization to construct its future through collaboration, shared understanding, and a commitment to action. SOAR means strengths. What are our greatest assets, opportunities? What can we improve, even innovate? Aspirations. What is our preferred future and results? How do we know it when we see it? What will we measure? And here I want to go into one aspect which is very important to understand, that in which we focus grows. So if you focus in the negative, if you focus in what doesn't work, you make it bigger. Normally in the SWOT analysis is 50% weaknesses and threats and 50% strengths and opportunities. The experience reveals that we get engaged in 80% conversation on weaknesses and threats and only 20% in strengths and opportunities. So we make it grow. The weaknesses, the negativity, what doesn't work. Appreciative inquiry is a method of change through what works, through strengths, through research on what makes teams move forward. And so here we have SOAR and some questions that can help us move on. Doesn't mean that we ignore what doesn't work, but we transform it through transforming our questions and how we deal with it. SOAR builds our strategic capacity, our ability to obtain our vision, mission, and goals to best service the stakeholders, and a deeply embedded ability that enables an organization to bridge the gap between its current performance and its potential. SOAR builds strategic capacity and creates an environment where strategy is agile, generative, and dynamic. So SOAR in a system starts by engaging every person. It's not that the leader imposes, but the leader listens to every person, engages, aligns, and innovates through the person, the team, the department, the division, the organization, and finally, the ecosystem. And so McKinsey, in one of its research, surveyed 1,200 global executives and learned that the highest performing organizations have a clear purpose, an understanding of what are their strengths, a shared aspirations, and their leaders know how to unleash ideas, opportunities with a results-driven process. And we marked in blue here the SOAR. So this is very interesting how, and there are many other research. Because of time, I only share a few. So in SOAR, we create a configuration of strengths. What are we doing right? What skills need to be enhanced? What other skills do we need? How do we know that we are succeeding? These are different questions that we can ask. And so part of the SOAR and part of generative leadership is the questions you ask lead you to the answers you find. So if you ask, what is the problem here? You will find many problems. If you ask, when problems have been solved here, what has helped us? Then you will find the solutions, the strengths that help us in overcoming our situations. So the questions you ask determine how the team moves on. So SOAR is about asking questions that are generative. And now we go to the next aspect of this presentation, and it's all connected. What kind of conversations are you having? Are your conversations appreciative or depreciative? Are your conversations statements or inquiry? And what happens when you make an affirmative statement? What happens when you make a destructive statement, which is depreciative? What happens when your inquiry is critical? And what happens when your inquiry is appreciative? Then you have conversations that are worth having. We're going to explore this a little bit more. I would like every one of you to recall, remember a critical or a destructive conversation that you were in. Just remember, maybe it was with a colleague, with a student, with a professor, with a relative, with a client, with a provider, but you had really a destructive conversation, very critical. It was negative, it was critical, it was not nice. Just remember that conversation. And how do you feel when you remember that conversation? What happens in you, in your body, in your mind, when you are recalling a negative conversation? Critical, destructive. How do you feel? You can write it in the chat. It happens when you are in a conversation that it's really, you afterwards you think, I'd rather not have had that conversation. So what happens? What do you feel? What is the impact? I'm asking you to remember that, and you can write it in the chat. No one is writing in the chat. Maybe in India you never have negative critical conversations. I don't know. I think in our human relating, many times, unfortunately, even we see leaders, political leaders, criticizing each other, being destructive, attacking each other. Now, how do you feel when you are in a conversation like that? Now, what happens in you? So someone says it's an energy loss. You feel exhausted after such a conversation, which is very true. Thank you, Dipti, for your sharing. You feel exhausted, you feel energy loss. I'm sure many other things, maybe you're a bit shy to share. So let's share. Let's go to the other aspect, because what do you notice about your own and the others' experiences? In essence, loss of energy, exhaustion, and many other things that I'm sure you know about. Now, let's go to the completely opposite. Recall a conversation that was great. A conversation in which you felt fantastic. You thought, wow, I want to have more of these conversations. Remember a conversation that was great, was inspiring. What do you notice? What happens? What do you feel when the conversation is great? It's a boost of energy to be more productive. It's so necessary that. Thank you, Sai Pavitra, for sharing. You feel a flow state, a high, fantastic. Thank you, Dipti. overall positive feeling. Yes. So what else? You have a great conversation and then the energy flows. Now imagine, what does a generative leader do? Creates more of those conversations, empowers those conversations. Can you imagine to be a leader that boosts energy in everyone to be more productive, that creates a flow state, a high, an overall positive feeling, using your own words. It's shared in the chat. Thank you for sharing. So going back to these squares of conversations, I could start, let's go into the blue square. As a leader, I could start a conversation saying, we shouldn't go to the right because of this or that. We should go to the left. What do you think? So I start the conversation saying what I think in an affirmative way. Then I ask others what they think. But what happens, the others are not going to say what they think, because you've already said it. You've already said that we should go to the right. So others will have fear to say the opposite, or you said going to the left. Whatever you said, affirmative, it doesn't invite others for a generative conversation. Now, what happens when the statement you make is actually depreciative? I think your work is really nonsense. I don't think you're going to progress as a professional if you continue like this. So you see, I'm making a statement that it's depreciative. I'm saying you are not going to progress. So this is the opposite of the appreciative intelligence that sees the tree in the seed, but actually I see the seed that is going to die. I say, you are hopeless. And how many times we make these kind of statements? And how do these statements influence the conversation? Now I can go to the yellow and make an inquiry, but that is critical, depreciative. How come this desk is always dirty? So I'm asking, how come the desk is dirty, but I'm already being depreciative and critical that it's dirty? What could I ask instead? Which would be the green. What can we do so that our desk is always clean? You see, I'm asking you because I don't know what's your problem that your desk is always dirty, but I'm going to be appreciative and I'm going to offer the possibility of co-creating a solution. But if I start with a depreciative and critical inquiry, then I'm not helping for a conversation that is worth having. So conversations worth having starts with an inquiry that is appreciative. For example, which could be the questions that we could ask. I have a clear idea we shouldn't go to the right, but I'm going to ask you and let's decide together. So which direction do you think is the best so that we achieve the results that we want? In which way you can collaborate or we can collaborate together to find the best solution? So you see, these questions invite you to think, to commit, to share your ideas. And this is creating generative conversations. So we could do an exercise, but I know there's no time. You know how many conversations you have that are more in the blue, like you say what you think, the other says what they think, and it's a monologue, it's not a conversation. Or you make destructive statements. This is nonsense. We will never progress. Or you make critical inquiry, questions that have a negative note in it. Or you really make appreciative inquiry questions that help the other move forward. Because appreciative inquiry is a collaborative discovery that gives life to living systems when they are most alive. So discover what makes the person go towards the sky and take the risk to explore the infinite possibilities that human life and relationships provide us. Appreciative is adding, valuing, and valuing what people and what is. So valuing people and valuing what is. Inquiry is asking questions, being curious, wondering and searching for what generates life. And so these were sort of the 4 key aspects. And I'm gonna end this presentation with questions. Leadership as a relational act. How do you care for your relationships? How do you create generative environments for growth? Remember the heliotropic principle. Generative listening. What is your level of listening? How can you improve your level of listening so that from that silence, what needs to emerge, the future that wants to present itself, presents. So for strategic thinking and generative collaboration, if you start focusing on what works and generate a configuration of strengths, how will this impact your world? And how would your world look like if you have more conversations worth having? So this is my presentation on generative leadership. There is a lot more to explore. And now I am open. If you have a few questions, you want to share something, I am here listening now to you.
I will request members to can unmute or they can send the questions to the chat.
Miriam,
Good.
may I?
Yes,
Yeah, please go ahead.
yes.
Yeah, I mean, a lovely presentation today. And my question is this, like, I was a part of the ITM or U Lab, the MIT U Lab. So we started using the same process. But there's one challenge that we keep facing, and that is like, there's a statement, the success of any intervention depends on the inner state of the intervener, right? So in generative leadership, not everyone is in that state of consciousness. So that becomes the challenge. So how do we shift that level of consciousness to bring it into the participatory mode? I mean, how does everyone, when you're co-creating, I mean, we might be starting with downloading, then factual, and then how does everyone reach that generative stage?
Well, this is a very good and very important question. And many answers are found in the ancient philosophy and practices of actually India, like, for example, meditation. I practice and I teach relational mindfulness. And the thing is, how do we reach that? First, through the conversations we engage. Second, the person has to start looking at themselves, not only looking at others. And this is not easy. We are always blaming others. So I have to look at myself. And third, to be able to trust the process. And that requires listening, being open within, so that what wants to emerge, emerges. And I think that it's very important to prepare some questions for the people that maybe are not so engaged in this level of listening, because through asking questions, we can go deeper into our inquiry, our inner research. I think that we are a lot in the head, and as you saw in this U of generative listening, it's okay, open mind, open heart, open will, and being fully present. And for that, we need to align our energies and not live so much from the head up, but to have all our chakras, our energy points open. And then it also requires to shift the understanding of power. I haven't talked about this aspect of power, but many leaders and managers think that power is where you are seated, your position, the money you earn, the possessions you have, the privileges you have. But there is an inner power which comes from sharing with others. And by sharing with others and having participative processes of leadership in which everyone is involved in the decision making, or at least, most of the persons that have to be involved in doing whatever needs to be done, they are also involved in the decision making. The sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom, and sharing the decision making process actually gives you more power, because others trust you more and they want to work with you. As you said, when the conversation is negative, you don't want to have other conversations with that person. So when the leader is open and listens and create generative conversations, then people want to work with that person. So actually that person is more successful. Thank you for your question. Thank you. And I'm going to see other questions. Pooja, I know you are sharing some, okay. Thank you, Pooja, for sharing this message to me. So anyway, I don't see any other question. Any other question? Anything you would like to share?
Madam, there is a question here with me.
Yeah.
Have you come across any examples when generative appreciative leadership may have led to being blind-sided to risks?
Actually, in appreciative leadership, you include all the voices. So thank you for this question, because then I can add also this aspect. You include all the voices. And when you include all the voices, then there's also the voice of someone who is very aware of the risk, whatever risk it is. And so this is why in appreciative inquiry, we enforce the importance of including all the voices. What does it mean, all the voices? It means that not only in the human resources department we are gonna decide, But about the training, we're going to also ask the people what they want. Or, for example, I was in an appreciative inquiry with a big company, manufacturing paper. They have many factories in Europe. And we had a meeting with HR managers of the different factories, and they say, oh, we want to have an open day so that all the families can come, the families of the workers can come and see the factory and see how the process of paper is done. And then someone said, we should include the voice of those that work in the factories, because actually, in one of the factories, recently one of those workers had died because of a machine problem. And so they said, we need to listen to them. In which way can we invite our children and family to see the process of creating paper in a way that is not dangerous for them? So it's not only the HR that are going to decide, okay, we're going to do an open day for families, but we're going to include all the voices. This is an example of a company in which I was doing an appreciative inquiry process. And so this being blindsided to risk happens when we don't include all the voices. It's not that we are blindsided because we are appreciative. It's we are blindsided because we are not listening to the voices that can say, no, if we want to do this, then we should do it in this way or in this other way. And or we could create a way that this risk doesn't, how do you say in English, doesn't occur, no? So that we are protected from that. So thank you for your question. One of the aspects of generative leadership is to be humble enough that I don't have all the answers. I have to ask my team or my teams. And I may think, let's do this. Yes, but I should ask the others also, because they will have other perspectives that I don't have. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank
Any
you
other
for
question? Any other question?
If nobody is asking, may I ask one last question?
Yeah,
Yes.
please go ahead.
I don't want to lose this opportunity. Even it's amazing to have somebody talk on these. Bombian dialogue. When we use Bombian dialogue in classrooms, I mean, can it on its own have appreciative inquiry or even humble inquiry a part of it? Right? We have been trying to bring that or exploring that as a tool instead of going by the typical, the teacher talking to the student. Instead of that, having this dialogue in classrooms. So during that process, is it possible, like the humble inquiry part also gets into it? Wouldn't it be a part of it?
Yes, this is also a very good question. Appreciative inquiry has relational inquiry, has humble inquiry from a space of not knowing, from a space of valuing the wisdom that the other may have, even if they have less experience, even if they are younger, but they have a different vision. So from my humility to have that humble inquiry. And also the, how would I say that, the inquiry into the other, what is the question that you would like to be asked? So imagine, instead of asking a question to you, I say, what question would you like me to ask you? And so this is really allowing you to go deep into co-creating the question. What would be the best question to be asked in this situation, instead of going into finding solutions and finding answers? So yes, humbly, actually in the process of I give a training on becoming a thinking partner, and I use the different levels of inquiry, and the humble inquiry is one of them. So yes, thank you. And then are there another question? Are there any specific practice adopt to inquire into strengths as inquiry? There are many. I mean, I shared a few questions in the PowerPoint, questions from the SOAR. And actually, I suggest you research on the book of positive questions. There is a book only of questions which are positive and appreciative. It's called the book of positive questions. So, and that gives you a whole range of different questions that you can ask. How do you handle?
There is two more questions.
Yes,
please. How do you handle the punitive
situations through generative leadership? Well, punitive situations, I would like to understand more. What do you mean? It's a punitive situation that is punitive for you, is punitive for the others, is negative for everyone.
There's some wrong, and you want to punish a person. You know, you want to you want to take some action against a person. You need to take some disciplinary actions against a person. Then how do you handle such things through the generative leadership? How can we become positive in such a situation?
Yes. First of all, there is the appreciative mediation through the use of nonviolence communication, which has one of the principles to go into the needs. What do I need and what does the other person need? Do I really need to punish that person? What is the need that I want? Maybe I want that person to listen to me. Maybe I want that person to understand something. Maybe, because sometimes this punitive goes from anger. I want the other person to pay for the suffering that I am having. And this is really a degenerative, you know, we were talking about appreciative or depreciative. This is worse than depreciative. I am suffering and I want you to suffer more because I think you make me suffer. And so then we have to see whether you really make me suffer or you didn't fulfill my expectations. I had some expectations about you and you didn't fulfill them. But what happens about my expectations? And maybe I have to check my own expectations. So of course, we need to see which situation do you refer to. But one of the aspects through generative leadership is to listen to both parties, to ask the person to go into what do they really need. And there's always a need under what it seems. It seems something, but you go deeper and there is a deeper need. And then to engage into a conversation, how can we satisfy those needs? Your needs and my needs. And then something unblocks, but it requires wisdom. And sometimes it requires another person to be like the appreciative mediator, to do appreciative mediation so that we can mediate in a punitive situation. And there is actually what is called restorative justice. And there's a whole, at least I know in Spain, even in the justice arena, there is a whole movement on mediation. And one of the courses that I'm involved in is in appreciative mediation and nonviolent communication for difficult conversations. So yes, it's possible. And how is this leadership style different from intent leadership, which is picking up fast as a style? So here we go in terms of the intention, no? Intent leadership. What is the intention? So I don't know maybe which intent leadership do you mean? Because the one I know is focusing on intentionality. And I think that generative leadership focuses on the intentionality so that everyone finds their own place in the team and in the organization, and everyone flourishes and makes the whole team flourish, and then the organization flourish. So, and flourishing means to connect with what makes us thrive, which with the best of everyone, to flow, to feel high, to feel you are giving your best. And so generative leadership has this intention, focusing on what gives life, focusing on high performance instead of low performance. And maybe I can put an example. There were two teams in United States, volleyball. And no, not volleyball, soccer, that's it. I am translating because I am Spanish speaking. So sorry if sometimes the word doesn't emerge immediately. So two soccer teams, they were 1 week in a training, and one soccer team, every night they were seeing a video of all the things they did wrong. And the intention was to learn from the mistakes and to prevent from doing them again. So imagine you are in a soccer team, every night you see the mistakes of others and your own mistakes in the video. And then, of course, you do your best to improve, to not repeat those mistakes. The other team, every night they were shown the best actions during the day, the best way of passing the ball, the exceptional, the great, the best play, with the intention of repeating more of that, of doing more of their best. So at the end of the week, both teams had improved. But what was the difference? The team in which every night they were shown the best of themselves, they were very engaged, they were very connective, they were very happy, they felt a bond as a team, and they felt proud of being part of that team and proud of themselves. And that empowered them to thrive. The other team had also improved, but they were not connective. They were ashamed because everyone had seen the whole week my own mistakes. Everyone has seen how bad I have been performing. So how am I going to feel? I want to hide. I don't want to be with others. And then I've also seen all the mistakes of others. So they were not as connective as the other team. And they were more, how would I say, more heavy, in the way of relating and in their conversations. So that's, so it's not that looking at what we do bad doesn't help us to improve. It does help improve. But the result as a connective leadership, which is part of being generative, and as an intentional leader that intends to create that connectivity, is different. So these are some ideas.
Thank you, Dr. Miriam. I think we had a fascinating session. We had a session where we got our People got lots of ideas regarding the emerging concept of the generative leadership. A few of faculty members have been practicing, as Dr. Professor Preeti talked about. She has been practicing the generative leadership at our business school, but many of us have only learned about it. We have only, learned about it in textbooks and all that thing, but we have not been practicing it. So it has given a very good insight to us that if we are to teach to our students to become generative leaders, who can be the only transformational leaders of tomorrow, probably these inputs will go a long way in enriching the knowledge of our students, our faculty members, and other people. So we are, on behalf of the Higher Education Forum, we are extremely grateful. Once again, we extend our sincere gratitude to you for being with us today. We look forward to working with you in future also. Thank you very much. Professor Ravi Jain,
Thank
would
you,
like to say a few
everyone.
words? Professor
Thank you,
Ravi.
so much.
everyone.
Thank you so much, Professor Miriam. It was a nice session and interesting concept. And this idea is fast emerging. I think certain examples that you have shared resonates with most of us in the administration space. So it's a really interesting session. We all enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to more engagements in future.
Before
Thank
we
you so
close
much.
the session, as a token of memory, I would request all the participants to switch on the camera so that we can have a group photo virtual screenshot. I request all the participants to please switch on the camera.
Good. We're gonna say cheese, huh?
Daniel, please confirm once all the screenshots are taken.
Sure, sir. A few people can turn on the cameras.
Yeah, we request everyone for a group photo, please switch on your camera.
Thank you, and it will be nice to know where the recording will be available.
Yeah, on behalf of SIBM Hyderabad, I request our Student Council President Suman Daniel to give the vote of thanks.
So firstly, thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us with such an insightful session. There's been a lot of lessons and teachings to take away from today's session, especially for graduates like me who would be entering into the corporate world within a couple of months now. It is very important to understand how to transform degenerative situations into generative situations, the heliotropic principle like you mentioned, and the kind of conversations that will help us not only climb in the corporate ladder, but also develop us and develop the relations in our personal lives. I'm sure everyone present here has greatly benefited out of this session. We would like to express our gratitude to Higher Education Forum HEF for associating with Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Hyderabad, for conducting such an insightful session. And we are hoping to have many more such collaborations ahead. We would like to thank Dr. A.K. Sengupta from HEF and Dr. Ravi Kumar Jain and Dr. Tanmay Dey from SIBM Hyderabad for this opportunity provided. Last but not the least, we would like to thank all the delegates and the participants for joining the session. And we hope to see you all for all the events lined up. With this, we come to an end of this session. Thank you all and have a good day. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See
Thank
you
you.
Thank you,
soon.
madam. Thank you, madam. We will send you the link. We will
Thank
send
you.
you the link. Thank you.
Daniel, you can call up, please.
Sure, sir.